The October wind cut through Cedar Bluff's main street like a promise of harder days ahead. Marcus Brennan stood at the counter of Hutchins' General Store, his calloused hands counting copper coins while his two children waited in the wagon outside. The afternoon light slanted through the dusty windows, illuminating rows of goods he could see but not afford. Flour, salt, coffee, and lamp oil, Marcus said quietly, sliding the items toward Tom Hutchins. The shopkeeper nodded, his weathered fingers working the pencil across a scrap of paper. Behind Marcus, 3 other customers paused their conversations. The scratch of pencil on paper sounded too loud in the sudden silence. Tom looked up, sympathy flickering across his face. That comes to $2.30. Marcus counted his coins again. $2 exactly. His jaw tightened as he stared at the pile of copper and silver, as if willing more to appear. Through the window, he could see 8-year-old Emma's face pressed against the glass, her breath fogging the pain. "I'll put back the lamp oil," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the shame burning in his chest. "Winter's coming on fast," Tom said gently. "You'll need light. We'll make do with what we have." Marcus reached for the tin of lamp oil, but his hand hesitated. Which necessity could he truly spare? The coffee kept him warm during pre-dawn chores. The flour made the bread that filled his children's bellies. The salt preserved what little meat he could hunt. His hands had built fences and broken horses. They'd held his dying wife and dug her grave. Now they counted coins that wouldn't stretch far enough, no matter how he arranged them on the worn counter. Tom cleared his throat. "I could extend credit." "No." The word came too sharp. Marcus softened it with a nod. "I pay what I owe. Always have." Behind him, a woman entered the store. Sarah Mitchell, the young widow who ran the boarding house. She carried a basket over one arm and moved with quiet purpose toward the fabric section. Marcus had seen her at Sunday services, always surrounded by others, always smiling. She seemed to know everyone's business, everyone's needs. Outside, Emma turned her head. Marcus could hear his own voice from earlier, teaching her while they rode to town. "Be grateful for what we have, Emma, not sorrowful for what we lack." Fine words from a father who couldn't afford lamp oil. He picked up the tin, ready to return it to the shelf. His children would learn to sleep when darkness fell, like their father had learned to sleep alone in a bed too wide for one man. Tom Hutchins raised his hand. "Hold on, Brennan." Marcus paused, the lamp oil cold and heavy in his grip. "Someone here just settled your account," Tom said, his eyes moving past Marcus to the other customers. "Paid the whole amount." Marcus turned. 5 faces looked back at him. Sarah Mitchell examining calico, old Henry Perkins studying harness leather, the Miller brothers suddenly fascinated by pickle barrels, and Clara Jensen inspecting canned peaches like they held the secrets of the universe. "Who?" Marcus asked. Tom shrugged. "Didn't give a name. Just said you'd need that oil come winter." Marcus scanned each face again, searching for a tell, a smile, anything. Sarah Mitchell kept her eyes on the fabric, but he caught the slightest curve at the corner of her mouth before she turned away. "I can't accept." "Already done," Tom said firmly. He began wrapping the items in brown paper. "Someone wanted to help. That's all there is to it." Marcus stood frozen, the lamp oil still in his hands. Charity. Anonymous kindness that somehow felt more exposing than public humiliation. He wanted to demand the benefactor's name, to return the money, to maintain the careful independence he'd built like a wall around his family. But Emma was watching through the window. And winter was indeed coming. "Thank you," he finally managed, the words tasting strange. "Tell them thank you." Tom handed him the wrapped parcels. "I expect you'll tell them yourself, once you figure it out." Marcus walked to the door, his arms full but his chest tight. He glanced back once. Sarah Mitchell was watching him now, her expression gentle and knowing. When their eyes met, She quickly looked away. Outside, the wind had picked up. Emma scrambled down from the wagon seat as he approached. "Did you get everything?" "Papa." "Everything and more," Marcus said. Lifting her back up, he climbed onto the seat and gathered the reins, his mind churning. Someone paid the difference. Don't know. He clicked his tongue, and the horse started forward. Someone who wanted to help without being thanked for it. Emma was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Like you said about gratitude." Marcus looked down at his daughter. Her serious eyes too old for 8 years. "Yes, Emma. Exactly like I said." But as they rolled out of Cedar Bluff, Marcus couldn't shake the image of Sarah Mitchell's hidden smile, or the weight of a debt he didn't know how to repay. Marcus couldn't let it rest. 3 days later, he found himself back in town, asking careful questions while he waited for the blacksmith to shoe his horse. "Tom Hutchins is a good man," the blacksmith said, hammering a shoe into shape, "but he keeps confidences. Won't tell you who paid that bill." "I just want to thank them proper," Marcus said. The blacksmith's apprentice, a boy of 15, piped up. "Mrs. Mitchell brings soup when folks are sick. She brought my ma a whole kettle when she had the fever last winter." The blacksmith shot the boy a look, but Marcus filed the information away. At the Sunday service, Marcus sat in his usual back pew with Emma and Samuel. The minister spoke about gratitude and grace, words that seemed aimed directly at Marcus's stubborn heart. When the service ended, Marcus watched Sarah Mitchell move through the congregation like a gentle current, stopping to speak with the elderly widow Johnson, laughing with the Parker children, organizing a quilting circle for the family whose barn had burned in September. She noticed everyone who needed noticing. Marcus gathered his children to leave, but Sarah approached before he reached the door. She wore a simple blue dress, her dark hair pinned neatly beneath her bonnet. Her eyes held warmth without pity. "Mr. Brennan," she said, smiling down at Emma, "I'm organizing a social for the children next Saturday. Games and apple cider. Would Emma like to come?" Emma's face lit up, and Marcus felt his careful isolation crack another inch. His daughter hadn't played with other children in months, maybe longer. He'd told himself it was about chores and distance. But the truth sat heavier. He'd been keeping them apart from the world, wrapped in grief like a shroud. "I don't want to impose," Marcus said. "It's no imposition. We want her there." Sarah's emphasis on want was gentle but firm. "The children miss her." Emma tugged his sleeve. "Please, Papa." Marcus looked at his daughter's hopeful face, then at Sarah's patient expression. She wasn't pushing, just offering. An open door he'd been walking past for 2 years. "All right," he said finally. "What time?" 2 o'clock at the church. "I'll watch her myself if you have work to tend. I'll bring her." The words felt like surrender and relief all at once. Saturday afternoon, Marcus brought Emma to the church social. The yard buzzed with children's voices, a sound so normal it felt foreign. Sarah had set up simple games, sack races, apple bobbing, a scavenger hunt through the church grounds. Parents clustered in small groups, talking and laughing while their children played. Marcus stood apart, uncertain. Emma hesitated beside him, her hand gripping his. Sarah appeared with 2 cups of cider. "For you and Emma," she said, handing them over. Though Emma might want to join the sack race first. A girl Emma's age ran past, calling her name. Emma looked up at Marcus, seeking permission. He nodded, and she was off, her laughter piercing the October air like a bell he'd forgotten existed. "Thank you," Marcus said to Sarah. "She needed this." "So did you," Sarah replied, her tone light but her eyes serious. "Community isn't charity, Mr. Brennan. It's just people caring for people." Before he could respond, she'd moved away to organize the next game. Marcus stood with his cider, watching Emma race in a burlap sack, watching her fall and get up laughing, watching her be a child again. Across the yard, Sarah Mitchell glanced back at him and smiled. She knew. He was certain now. But she'd never claim credit, never expect repayment. She'd simply given. The way she gave to everyone soup for the sick, quilts for the burned out, games for lonely children. The question that had haunted him for days suddenly shifted. Not who paid my bill, but why did it take charity to show me what my daughter was missing? As the sun lowered and the social ended, Emma ran to him breathless and happy. Her cheeks flushed. Can I come next time? Papa. Yes, Marcus said, brushing dirt from her shoulder. We'll come together. On the ride home, Emma chattered about the games, the friends, the apple cider. Samuel dozed against Marcus's side, and Marcus thought about Sarah Mitchell's words. Community isn't charity, it's just people caring for people. He'd been so busy protecting his children from dependence that he'd isolated them from life itself. The realization sat heavy as stone in his chest. When they reached the homestead, Marcus noticed something odd. A neat stack of split firewood sat beside the barn. Wood he hadn't cut. No note, no name, just kindling and logs ready for winter. Emma saw it too. Who brought that? Papa. Marcus stared at the wood, then looked back toward town. Miles distant in the growing dark, someone who wanted to help, he said quietly, without being thanked for it. The pattern was becoming clear, and Marcus Brennan was beginning to understand he'd been fighting the wrong battle all along. That night, after Emma and Samuel slept, Marcus sat alone by the fire. He fed wood into the stove, anonymous wood, given freely, and watched the flames dance. The cabin felt smaller in the darkness, the silence louder. 2 years. 2 years since Caroline died, bringing Samuel into the world. 2 Septembers had passed, and Marcus had marked time by keeping his head down, working his land, raising his children with grim determination. He told himself it was strength. This refusal to need anyone. Now he saw it for what it was. Cowardice dressed as pride. The lamp oil he couldn't afford sat on the shelf, its tin catching firelight. Someone in Cedar Bluff had seen him counting coins, had witnessed his struggle, and had quietly erased it. They'd asked for nothing, expected nothing, just gave. Marcus thought about Caroline's last words, whispered through pain and failing strength. Don't let grief make you small. Marcus, stay big enough for love. He'd thought he was being big by handling everything alone, providing without asking, protecting his children from the shame of dependence. But Emma's laughter at the church social had shown him the truth. He'd been shrinking, not growing, isolating, not protecting. Outside, the first snow began to fall. October snow, early and light, but a warning nonetheless. Winter was coming, as Tom Hutchins had said, and Marcus's roof needed patching. His wood supply was low, his small savings even lower. He could keep fighting alone, keep refusing help, keep teaching his children that strength meant needing no one. Or he could do what terrified him more than poverty. He could accept that someone in Cedar Bluff saw his struggle and chose to ease it, not from pity, but from something deeper, something Caroline would have called grace. Samuel stirred in his sleep, making small sounds. Marcus rose and checked on his son, pulling the blanket higher. The boy looked like Caroline, same dark eyes, same serious expression even in sleep. Emma favored Marcus, blonde and sturdy, but she had her mother's kindness. They deserved better than a father trapped in grief. Marcus returned to the fire and made a decision. Tomorrow he'd go back to Cedar Bluff. Not to work, not to buy supplies, but to find out who'd paid his bill, who'd left the firewood. Not to repay the debt he suspected that would insult the gift, but to understand this strange mercy that asked nothing in return. Because if someone could see past his pride to his need, maybe he could learn to see past his isolation to his children's need for community, for connection, for the kind of life Caroline would have wanted for them. The snow fell harder outside, accumulating on the windowsill. Marcus watched it pile up, white and quiet and relentless. Winter was indeed coming, and he could face it alone, stubborn and proud. Or he could let Cedar Bluff help him face it, the way frontier towns had always survived together. The point of no return arrived not with fanfare, but with snow and silence and a father finally admitting what he'd known all along: he couldn't do this alone. Not anymore. Marcus banked the fire and climbed into his too-wide bed. Tomorrow would bring questions. But tonight brought something harder and more necessary: the first crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. Outside. The snow continued falling. Inside. Something frozen began. Very slowly. To thaw. Marcus returned to Cedar Bluff the following Tuesday, ostensibly to sell eggs at the general store. But his real purpose was detective work, and he wasn't subtle about it. "Tom," he said, leaning on the counter, "about that payment. Can't help you." Tom interrupted cheerfully. "Confidences are sacred in this establishment. Even if I just want to say proper thanks. Even then." Tom grinned. "Though I will say you're not the first person that particular someone has helped. Probably won't be the last either." Marcus tried the blacksmith next, who simply shook his head and returned to his forge. The minister offered a sermon about anonymous charity in biblical times, which didn't help at all. The widow Johnson, when approached carefully, mentioned that some folks just have a gift for noticing. By afternoon, a pattern had emerged. Every person Marcus questioned mentioned Sarah Mitchell in some capacity soup she'd brought, quilts she'd organized, wood she'd mysteriously arranged to appear at the right place and time. Marcus found himself standing outside her boarding house, a neat 2-story building with lace curtains and a painted sign. Through the window, he could see her moving in the kitchen, preparing something that smelled of cinnamon and apples. He knocked. Sarah answered, wiping flour from her hands onto her apron. Surprise flickered across her face, followed by something that might have been amusement. "Mr. Brennan," she said, "are you looking for a room?" "I'm looking for answers," Marcus replied, then softened his tone. "May I speak with you?" She stepped aside, gesturing him into a tidy parlor. "I'm making apple butter." "You'll have to talk while I work." He followed her to the kitchen, where pots bubbled on the stove and the air hung thick with sweet steam. Sarah returned to stirring, her movements practiced and efficient. "Did you pay my bill at Hutchins's store?" Marcus asked directly. Sarah didn't look up from her work. "Would it change what you teach Emma about gratitude?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Marcus stood silent, considering. "No," he finally said, "but I'd like to understand why. Why I'd help someone who needed help." Sarah's tone held gentle challenge. "That seems fairly obvious, doesn't it? Why anonymously? Why not just offer?" Now she did look at him, her dark eyes steady. "Because you would have refused. Men like you always do. Men like me. Proud men. Good men who think accepting help makes them less good." She returned to stirring. "I've known a few." Marcus leaned against the door frame, studying her. "The firewood, too. The timber merchant sometimes delivers to wrong addresses." Her lips quirked. "Happens more often than you'd think." Despite himself. Marcus smiled. "Very convenient mistakes. Aren't they?" Sarah ladled apple butter into jars, the kitchen filling with autumn sweetness. "Coffee's on the table if you want some." Marcus poured himself a cup and sat. The kitchen was warm and lived in, different from his own sparse cabin. Sarah moved through it like someone at home in her purpose. "Why do you do it?" he asked quietly. "Help everyone, I mean." Sarah's hand stilled on a jar. For a moment she was silent, and Marcus thought he'd overstepped. Then she spoke, her voice softer than before. "My husband Nathaniel died 3 winters ago. Pneumonia. We'd been trying for a baby. But..." She stopped, swallowed. It never happened. Then he was gone. And I had this big house meant for a family I'd never have. Marcus said nothing, letting her continue. I could have drowned in what I lost. Many do. But Nathaniel used to say empty hands are just hands waiting to help. She looked at Marcus directly. So that's what I did. I helped. And it turns out helping others fills the empty spaces grief carves out. The honesty of it hit Marcus square in the chest. He understood that particular emptiness, that particular carving. I'm sorry, he said. About Nathaniel. I'm sorry about Caroline. Sarah replied. Emma mentioned her mother sometimes. She must have been special. She was. Marcus turned his coffee cup in his hands. She told me not to let grief make me small. I didn't listen. You're listening now, Sarah said gently. That counts for something. They sat in comfortable silence. Two people who understood loss sitting in a kitchen filled with the smell of preserving fruit making sweet. Things from what would otherwise rot and waste. Finally, Marcus spoke. The firewood, the bill, I can't repay it. Not right now. I don't want repayment. Then what do you want? Sarah smiled. I want Emma to come to the church social next month. I want you to stop avoiding people who care about you. I want you to let Cedar Bluff be what it's meant to be. Which is home, she said simply. Not just a place you live. Home. Marcus stood to leave, but paused at the door. Thank you, Sarah, for seeing what I needed before I knew to ask. We all need that sometimes, she replied. The seeing and the being seen. Walking back to his wagon. Marcus felt lighter than he had in months. The debt remained unpaid in coin. But perhaps that was the point. Some debts weren't meant for repayment, they were meant to be passed forward. Given to the next person standing at a counter counting inadequate coins. He thought of Emma's laughter at the social. He thought of Sarah's gentle persistence. He thought of Cedar Bluff, quietly taking care of its own without fanfare or expectation. And for the first time since Caroline died, Marcus Brennan felt something dangerous and necessary stir in his chest. Hope. November settled over Cedar Bluff with shorter days and longer shadows. Marcus found himself in town more often now. Not hiding behind errands, but actually present. He spoke with Tom Hutchins about more than purchases. He helped the blacksmith shoe a difficult horse. He stayed after Sunday services instead of rushing away. And he saw Sarah Mitchell everywhere organizing donations for the Johnsons' new barn. Teaching young girls to knit at the church. Bringing hot soup to old Henry Perkins, who'd taken ill. One Thursday afternoon, Marcus knocked on her boarding house door with a specific question. Sarah answered, her hair slightly disheveled, ink staining her fingers. Ledgers, she explained, noticing his glance. Running a boarding house requires mathematics I didn't expect. I'm handy with numbers, Marcus offered. Ranching requires keeping track. Sarah hesitated, then stepped aside. I won't turn down competent help. They worked side by side at her kitchen table. Marcus reviewing her accounts while Sarah prepared dinner for her current boarders. The domesticity of it felt strange and right all at once, two people sharing space and purpose without romance or obligation, just the simple comfort of company. You're losing money on the Simmons room, Marcus said, pointing to a column. Charging too little for what you provide. They're newlyweds just starting out, Sarah replied. Chopping vegetables. I remember what that's like. You can't run a business on sentiment. I can run my business however I choose. Her tone was light but firm. Money isn't the only currency that matters. Marcus looked at her. This woman who gave and somehow never seemed depleted. Doesn't it exhaust you taking care of everyone? Sarah set down her knife. Does it exhaust you, taking care of Emma and Samuel alone? That's different. They're my children. And these are my people, she resumed, cutting. We all choose what we carry. Marcus, I choose to carry what I can for those who need carrying. The words settled between them, true and challenging. Marcus returned to the ledgers, but his mind worked on a different problem. How did someone carry so much without breaking? How did Sarah give constantly without resentment? How do you do it? He asked quietly. After losing Nathaniel, how did you not just... He couldn't finish. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried weight. The first winter after he died, I thought I'd follow him. Not dramatically. Just stop trying. Stop eating right. Stop staying warm. Stop caring if I woke up. Marcus looked up sharply. Then Clara Jensen's husband left her with 4 children and no money. She came to my door desperate, and I had empty rooms, so I took her in. Sarah's hands stilled. Those children needed someone, so I became someone. And then there was always another someone who needed something. And I discovered that grief doesn't heal when you sit with it. It heals when you move through it. By helping others. By remembering that loss is just one part of a life, not the whole thing. She met his eyes. Nathaniel is gone. Our baby never came. That's true. But I'm still here. And while I'm here, I can either mourn what isn't or tend to what is. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. I've been mourning what isn't. I know, Sarah said gently. But Emma and Samuel are what is. Cedar Bluff is what is. And maybe, she paused, choosing words carefully. Maybe there's more what is waiting. If you stop guarding the empty spaces. The kitchen smelled of onions and herbs and something deeper possibility. Marcus looked at this woman who'd saved him without asking permission, who carried her grief by carrying others, who somehow saw past his walls to the person trapped behind them. I don't know how, he admitted. How to stop guarding. Start small, Sarah suggested. Come to Thanksgiving dinner here. The boarders and I cook together. Emma and Samuel would enjoy it. We couldn't impose... Marcus! Sarah's voice held affectionate exasperation. When will you understand you're not imposing? You're participating. There's a difference. He wanted to argue, to maintain his careful distance. But he thought of Emma's laughter at the church social. He thought of Sarah's words about what is versus what isn't. What time? He asked. Sarah's smile was like sunrise. 2 o'clock, and bring your appetite. Marcus finished the ledgers and prepared to leave. At the door, he turned back. Sarah, the firewood, the bill, all of it. I want you to know it mattered. Not just the help itself, but that you cared enough to notice. Everyone deserves to be noticed, Sarah replied, especially those trying so hard to be invisible. Walking home through November cold, Marcus realized something fundamental had shifted. Sarah had shown him her own grief, her own empty spaces. She'd been vulnerable first, giving him permission to be vulnerable in return. And somewhere in her kitchen, between ledgers and vegetables and honest words, Marcus Brennan had stopped being quite so alone. The thaw continued, slow and steady. Winter was coming. But maybe he wouldn't have to face it the way he'd faced the last 2. Maybe this time, he'd let himself be carried a little. And in being carried, learn to carry others, just like Sarah did, just like Cedar Bluff had always done, quietly and without fanfare. For those willing to notice, the first major storm hit Cedar Bluff in early December with a fury that surprised even the old-timers. Snow fell in thick curtains, wind howled through every crack, and the temperature dropped so fast that water froze in buckets before it could be carried inside. Marcus's cabin, sturdy enough for normal winters, hadn't been properly maintained since Caroline died. He'd patched what he could, but grief and poverty make poor builders. When the storm intensified on the second night, he heard an ominous crack above the bedroom where Emma and Samuel slept. He moved them to his room just as part of the roof collapsed, snow and broken timber crashing onto their empty beds. The children huddled under blankets while Marcus stared at the damage, his heart hammering. If they'd been sleeping there, he didn't finish the thought. By morning light, The storm had passed, but the damage remained clear. A section of roof gaped open, snow piled on the bedroom floor, and the remaining structure looked dangerously weak. Marcus needed to repair it immediately. Before the next storm came, he climbed up in bitter cold, his breath fogging, his hands already numb. The ladder was icy. The roof was worse, but Marcus had been fixing things alone for 2 years. He didn't know any other way. Halfway through removing damaged boards, his frozen fingers slipped. The hammer fell. Marcus tried to catch himself, grabbed for a beam that wasn't there, and pitched sideways off the roof. He landed hard in the snowbank below. The wind knocked from his lungs. Pain exploded in his right wrist and ribs. He lay there, gasping, staring up at the damaged roof and the pale winter sky beyond it. "Papa." Emma's scream cut through the cold. Marcus tried to sit up, but his wrist collapsed under him. Definitely sprained. Maybe broken. His ribs screamed with each breath. He managed to get to his knees, then his feet. Clutching his injured arm, Emma stood in the doorway, her face white. "Papa, you're hurt." "I'm all right." He lied, but his voice shook. "You're not." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "You need help. I'll be fine. I just need—" Marcus tried to think through the pain. What did he need? He couldn't climb back up. Couldn't swing a hammer with one hand. Couldn't leave the roof open to the next storm. Emma made a decision before Marcus could stop her. She was pulling on her coat. "I'm getting Miss Sarah." "Emma, no. The snow's too deep, you can't." But his 8-year-old daughter was already out the door, running through snowdrifts that came to her thighs, falling, and getting up and running again. Marcus watched helplessly, his useless arm hanging, his ribs making it hard to breathe. She disappeared toward town, 3 miles distant through heavy snow. Marcus stood in the yard, defeated. He'd spent 2 years proving he needed no one, and now his daughter was risking frostbite to save him from his own stubborn pride. He made it back inside and sat by the fire, trying not to think about Emma struggling through snow, about the roof open to weather, about how completely he'd failed at the one thing he'd sworn to do, protect his children. 2 hours later, he heard voices. Marcus stumbled to the window and saw not just Emma and Sarah, but a wagon with 6 men, the minister and his sons, Tom Hutchins, the blacksmith, Henry Perkins bundled against cold despite his age. Sarah reached the door first, Emma beside her. The girl was snow-covered but safe, her cheeks red from cold and crying. "Emma said you fell," Sarah said, her eyes scanning Marcus for injuries. "Let me see that wrist." "I'm fine," Marcus started, but Sarah was already unwrapping his makeshift bandage. "It's not broken, but it's badly sprained." She looked at Emma. "You did right. Coming to get me." Good time, the men were already unloading lumber and tools. Marcus tried to stand, to protest, but pain and Sarah's firm hand kept him seated. "They're fixing the roof," she said simply. "Don't argue." "I didn't ask for help." "Emma did." Sarah's voice carried steel beneath the gentleness. "Or doesn't her asking count?" The words hit harder than the fall. Marcus looked at his daughter, remembering her terrified scream, her desperate run through snow. She'd asked for help because her father was too proud to do it himself. Through the window, Marcus watched the men work. They moved efficiently, calling instructions to each other, passing materials up the ladder. Their wives arrived with coffee and biscuits, with bandages for Sarah to properly wrap Marcus's wrist, with blankets for Emma and Samuel. By afternoon, the roof was repaired. Better than before. Actually new shingles, reinforced beams, proper sealing against weather. The men climbed down, accepted coffee, refused payment. "We take care of our own," the minister said simply. "That's what community means." They departed in the same wagon they'd arrived in, cheerful despite the cold, as if repairing a neighbor's roof was nothing unusual, because for them, it wasn't. Sarah stayed behind, brewing tea and tending Marcus's injuries while Emma and Samuel ate the food the townswomen had left. The cabin felt crowded with so many supplies, so much evidence of care. Marcus sat silent, his bandaged wrist throbbing, his pride wounded deeper than his ribs. Everyone had left now except Sarah, who was washing dishes like she belonged there. "I didn't want this," he said quietly. "I know," Sarah replied, not turning from the sink. "I wanted to manage alone. You almost died alone." Now she did turn, her expression serious. "Emma ran 3 miles through snow to save you. What lesson does that teach her about asking for help?" Marcus had no answer. He looked at Emma curled up by the fire with Samuel, both children exhausted. His daughter had been braver than her father today. She'd known when to set pride aside. "Thank you," Marcus finally said. The words inadequate. "For coming. For bringing them. Emma asked me to save her father." Sarah said softly, "Of course I came." She finished the dishes and gathered her coat at the door. She paused. "Marcus, you teach Emma about gratitude. But what does she learn if you refuse to accept the kindness you claim to value?" Then she was gone, leaving Marcus alone with his children and his shame and a roof that should have been his to fix but wasn't. Outside, Emma's small footprints still marked the snow, the desperate path she'd run to rescue a father too stubborn. To rescue himself. Marcus looked at those footprints until darkness fell, and knew something had to change. Marcus didn't sleep that night. His wrist throbbed despite the willow bark tea Sarah had left. His ribs ached with each breath. But worse than the physical pain was the image of Emma running through snow, risking herself because her father's pride mattered more than common sense. By morning, fury had replaced shame. He dressed carefully, favoring his injuries, and rode to town with Emma and Samuel. He left the children at the church social Sarah had arranged another gathering, conveniently timed, and went to find Sarah at her boarding house. She answered his knock with flour on her apron and questions in her eyes. "I need to speak with you," Marcus said, his voice tight. Sarah stepped aside. "Kitchen. I'm making bread." He followed her, his anger building with each step. In the kitchen, he turned to face her. "I didn't ask for your interference." Sarah's hands stilled on the dough. "No, you didn't. I didn't ask for the roof repair, the firewood, any of it." "You're right." She met his gaze steadily. Emma asked. "She's 8 years old." And she was terrified. Sarah's voice rose to match his. She watched her father fall off a roof and lie there injured. "She did what you should have done weeks ago. She asked for help. I can take care of my own family." By nearly dying, Sarah slammed the dough onto the counter. "By making your 8-year-old daughter run 3 miles through snow to save you. That's taking care of them." Marcus stepped back, the force of her anger surprising him. Sarah wasn't finished. "You teach Emma gratitude. Marcus, beautiful lessons about being thankful despite hardship. But what does she learn when you refuse to accept the very kindness you tell her to appreciate?" Sarah's eyes blazed. "You're teaching her that needing help is shameful, that pride matters more than safety. That love offered should be rejected. That's not—" Marcus tried to interrupt, but Sarah talked over him. "She asked me to save her father. Those were her words. Marcus, not fix our roof or help Papa. She said save him. And because you were lying in the snow with a broken wrist and you still wouldn't ask for help." The words landed like stones. Marcus felt his anger drain away, leaving only the truth beneath. Emma had asked. His daughter had been brave enough to do what he was too proud to do. He sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" Sarah's voice softened. "Accept help. Need people. He gestured helplessly. "Not enough on my own." Sarah sat across from him, her hands still dusted with flour. "None of us are enough on our own. That's why we have each other. When Caroline died, I promised myself I'd never burden anyone again. Marcus stared at his bandaged wrist. I'd lost so much. I couldn't bear the thought of taking from others, too. Taking? Sarah shook her head. Marcus, when the town came to fix your roof, do you think they felt burdened? They should have. It's my responsibility. They felt useful. They felt like neighbors. They felt connected to you and Emma and Samuel. She leaned forward. You're not taking from them. You're giving them a chance to be the community they want to be. Marcus thought about the men cheerfully hammering, the women bringing food and blankets. Everyone working together like it was the most natural thing in the world. Because for them, it was, I watched my daughter run through snow to save me, he said quietly. And I realized my pride almost cost her father. Yes, Sarah agreed. It almost did. They sat in silence. The bread dough rose slowly between them, patient and inevitable. I'm sorry, Marcus finally said, for being angry, for being scared. Sarah supplied gently. It's terrifying, needing people, trusting them, letting them see your weaknesses. How did you learn it? The hard way. Sarah smiled sadly. After Nathaniel died, I tried to do everything alone too. Nearly starved myself doing it. Then Clara Jensen showed up desperate, and I discovered that helping her helped me. That being needed gave me purpose. That community isn't about independence. It's about interdependence. Marcus absorbed this. So I let people help because it helps them. You let people help because that's what love looks like. Sarah stood and returned to her bread. The anonymous stranger who paid your bill. They didn't do it to burden you with debt. They did it because seeing you struggle hurt them, and helping you ease that hurt. You gave them a chance to act on their compassion. It was a completely different way of seeing. Not charity received, but love offered. Not dependence, but mutual care. There's a family, Sarah said, kneading dough. The Daltons. New baby. Struggling like you were. They could use some firewood. Maybe some food. Marcus understood immediately. You want me to help them. I want you to understand that yesterday you needed help. Tomorrow they will. And next month someone else. We all take turns. She shaped the dough into loaves. That's what community means. We carry each other. Marcus thought about the Daltons. Young family. New baby. Probably terrified and proud like he'd been. Refusing help they desperately needed. What do they need? He asked. Sarah's smile was like sunrise. Firewood. Medicine for the baby. Maybe just knowing someone notices. I could split wood. Even one-handed, I could manage that. You could. Sarah agreed. Or you could ask the blacksmith to help, and he could ask Tom to contribute supplies. And suddenly it's not you helping them, it's Cedar Bluff being what Cedar Bluff is. Marcus stood to leave. At the door, he turned back. Sarah, thank you for not letting me drown in my own pride. Thank Emma, Sarah replied. She's braver than both of us. Walking back to collect his children. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. The wall he'd built wasn't protecting anyone. It was just isolating them. Emma had known it. Sarah had known it. Even Cedar Bluff had known it. Only Marcus had been too stubborn to see. But he saw it now. And seeing it, he could finally start to change. The chain of generosity that had saved him, it was time to pass it forward. Not to repay a debt, but to continue a legacy. To be what Cedar Bluff had been for him. To notice those who needed noticing. To help those too proud to ask. To build community one anonymous kindness at a time. Just like Sarah did. Just like the stranger at the general store had done. Just like Emma had done. Running through snow to save a father who thought he didn't need saving. Marcus collected his children from the social. Emma looked up at him, worried. I'm sorry I made you run through the snow, Marcus said, kneeling despite his aching ribs. You were right to ask for help, braver than your papa. Emma hugged him carefully, mindful of his injuries. Miss Sarah says asking for help is being strong, not weak. Miss Sarah is right, Marcus said, about a lot of things. And for the first time in 2 years, Marcus Brennan felt like maybe he was going to be all right. Because he wasn't alone anymore. He'd finally stopped trying to be. December deepened into true winter. Marcus's wrist healed slowly, but his perspective healed faster. He began noticing things he'd been too isolated to see before, who struggled, who needed, who carried burdens quietly. The Daltons' baby had colic. Young parents. Exhausted and overwhelmed. Marcus remembered those early days with Emma. How helpless he'd felt. So he split firewood one-handed, awkward but determined, and left it at their door before dawn. No note. No name. The widow Johnson needed medicine she couldn't afford. Marcus paid Tom Hutchins to add it to his account with instructions, tell her it's already settled. The same words spoken to him months ago. When the Miller brothers' well froze, Marcus organized a work party. 6 men showed up, drilled a new well, refused payment, because that's what neighbors did. Cedar Bluff began to notice. Not who was doing these kindnesses. Marcus was as anonymous as his original benefactor had been, but that they were happening. The town, always decent, became something more, a place where help arrived before pride could refuse it. By late December, the pattern was established. Someone struggled, someone helped, no one took credit. The chain of generosity spread like warmth through frozen ground. The church Christmas social arrived on a Saturday evening. The whole town gathered, families crowded into pews, children running between the aisles, the smell of pine boughs and cider filling the air. Sarah had organized it, naturally, with help from what seemed like everyone. Marcus sat with Emma and Samuel, watching the community he'd avoided for so long. These people had fixed his roof. They'd welcomed his daughter. They'd given anonymously and asked for nothing, and he'd almost missed it all because he was too proud to admit he needed them. The minister stood to speak, calling for attention. The room quieted. Before we begin the celebration, I'd like to recognize what's been happening in Cedar Bluff these past months, he said. Acts of kindness, given anonymously, food for the hungry, medicine for the sick, firewood for the cold. Help offered before it's asked for. Heads nodded around the room. Marcus kept his eyes forward, uncomfortable with attention even indirectly aimed at him. We don't know who started it, the minister continued, but it's changing us, making us more aware of each other, more willing to help, more willing to be helped. Sarah caught Marcus's eye from across the room. She smiled, encouraging. The minister spread his hands. So I'd like to suggest we make this permanent. A community fund for anonymous help. Everyone contributes what they can. We identify needs and meet them quietly. No fanfare, no expectations. Just neighbors caring for neighbors. Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Tom Hutchins stood. I'll donate the first month's contribution, $20 to start. I'll match it, said the blacksmith. One by one, people stood, offering money, time, skills. The room buzzed with commitment and possibility. Marcus felt something building in his chest, a pressure, an urgency. He'd been anonymous long enough. These people deserved to know that they'd started this, not him. They'd saved him first. He stood, his legs shaking. The room quieted. I'd like to say something, Marcus began, his voice rough. Emma looked up at him, surprised. Sarah leaned forward, attentive. Most of you know I lost my wife 2 years ago. What you might not know is that I spent those 2 years hiding, too proud to ask for help, too stubborn to accept it. Marcus's hands gripped the pew in front of him. Last October, I stood in Tom's store counting coins I didn't have. Someone paid my bill anonymously, Then someone left firewood. Someone organized my roof repair when I fell. He looked at Sarah, who was wiping her eyes. You all saved me, Marcus continued. Not just from poverty or a broken roof. You saved me from drowning in pride and grief. You showed me what community means. The room was silent now, everyone listening. So when I started helping others, the Daltons, the Johnsons, whoever needed it, I was just passing forward what you gave me. I didn't start this. Marcus gestured around the room. You did. Every one of you who gives quietly, who notices the struggling, who helps without expecting thanks. Tom Hutchins wiped his eyes. The minister nodded, smiling. I don't know who paid my bill that day, Marcus said, though he had strong suspicions. But I know why. Because in Cedar Bluff, we take care of our own, not out of obligation, out of love. He sat down abruptly, his courage spent. Emma grabbed his hand. Samuel leaned against his side. The room erupted, not in applause that would have been wrong for this moment, but in sound. Voices talking, agreeing, committing. The minister's suggestion of a community fund became reality in minutes. Everyone wanted to contribute. Everyone wanted to participate in this chain of grace that had transformed one lonely widower and could transform others. Sarah made her way through the crowd to Marcus. She didn't say anything, just squeezed his shoulder. But her eyes spoke volumes. I'm proud of you. After the meeting, as families gathered coats and children, Tom Hutchins approached Marcus. That was a brave thing, speaking up. Scariest thing I've done, Marcus admitted. Harder than falling off a roof. I expect it was, Tom grinned. But you gave this town permission to be what it always wanted to be. That matters. Walking home through snow with his children. Marcus felt lighter. The secret he'd been carrying, his anonymous kindnesses, was shared now. The burden of gratitude was distributed across the whole community. And somehow, in the sharing, it had multiplied. Cedar Bluff hadn't just received his message. They'd amplified it, made it permanent, turned his small acts into a tradition that might outlast them all. Papa, Emma asked, bundled against his side. Are you happy? Marcus thought about the question. Happy felt too simple for the complex mixture of peace and purpose and connection flowing through him. But it was close enough. Yes, Emma, he said. I think I am. Good, she said simply. Miss Sarah says you deserve to be. Marcus looked back at Cedar Bluff, its windows glowing with light. Smoke rising from chimneys into the winter sky. Somewhere in one of those houses, Sarah Mitchell was probably organizing the next kindness, noticing the next need. And tomorrow, Marcus would help her. Not alone, but alongside the whole town, because that's what community meant. They carried each other, all of them, always. March arrived with the smell of thawed earth and returning birds. Winter's grip loosened slowly, reluctantly, the way all hard things end in stages, with setbacks, but ultimately surrendering to something warmer. Marcus stood in his garden plot, surveying the neat rows Sarah and Emma had marked for planting. His wrist was fully healed now, strong enough to grip a shovel. The roof he'd nearly died repairing stood firm against spring rains, and the cabin that had felt like a tomb for 2 years felt, tentatively, like a home. Papa, can we plant the carrots here? Emma asked, pointing to a corner plot. That's good drainage, Marcus agreed. Smart thinking. Sarah arrived with Samuel on her hip, the boy chattering about seed packets. She'd been coming to the homestead more often lately, helping with garden planning, sharing meals, teaching Emma to read better. Nothing was official between them, no promises made. But something was growing, patient and inevitable as spring itself. The Harrisons arrive tomorrow, Sarah said, setting Samuel down. New family from back east. Lost everything in a bank failure. Marcus knew what came next. He'd become part of Sarah's network of noticing, her quiet conspiracy of care. What do they need? Everything. Sarah replied, but mostly welcome. Mostly to know Cedar Bluff sees them. I'll talk to Tom about supplies, Marcus said. Get some basics together. Already done. Sarah smiled. I thought maybe you could help with the welcome wagon. Show them around town. Me? Marcus was surprised. I'm not exactly the welcoming type. You were welcomed, Sarah pointed out. Even when you didn't want to be, maybe you're exactly the right type. That afternoon, Marcus stood in Hutchins' general store, organizing supplies for the Harrison family. Tom had donated flour and coffee. The blacksmith contributed tools. The minister's wife brought preserves and bread. Clara Jensen offered children's clothes her kids had outgrown. This is a good thing you've started, Tom said, wrapping the items. The community fund, Anonymous Helps, makes Cedar Bluff feel more like a real town. Sarah started it, Marcus corrected. I just finally noticed. Well, you notice plenty now. Tom tied the package with twine. Seems like every time someone struggles, you're organizing help before they know to ask. Marcus thought about that. He had become a noticer. Hadn't he liked Sarah? He moved through Cedar Bluff paying attention to who carried burdens, who needed carrying. The difference was, now he had a whole town helping him notice. The next day, the Harrisons arrived, a young couple with 2 small children. Everything they owned packed in a single wagon. They looked exhausted and weary, the way Marcus had felt for 2 years, the way anyone feels when pride is all that's left. Marcus approached with Emma and Samuel. Mr. Harrison, I'm Marcus Brennan. Welcome to Cedar Bluff. Harrison's handshake was firm, but his eyes were guarded. We're grateful for any work available. We'll pay our way. I'm sure you will, Marcus said. But right now, Cedar Bluff would like to welcome you properly. He gestured to the wagon he'd brought filled with supplies. All anonymous. All given freely. Harrison stared at it, confusion and suspicion warring on his face. We can't accept charity, Harrison said stiffly. Marcus recognized that tone. He'd used it himself not 6 months ago. It's not charity, Marcus said gently. It's community. Someone helped me when I needed it. Now we're helping you. Someday you'll help someone else. That's how it works here. Harrison's wife, holding their youngest, looked at Marcus with desperate hope. We've been traveling 3 weeks. We're so tired. Then let's get you settled, Marcus said. Sarah Mitchell runs the boarding house. She's expecting you. At Sarah's. The Harrisons were welcomed like family. The boarders helped unload the wagon. Sarah showed them to a room, refused payment for the first week. The children were fed and bathed, the parents given hot coffee and understanding. Marcus watched Harrison's defenses slowly crumble as Cedar Bluff did what it did best: noticed. Cared. Helped without asking. By evening. The young man's eyes held less wariness and more wonder. Why? Harrison finally asked Marcus. Why help strangers? Marcus thought about how to explain. About lamp oil and anonymous payments. About roof repairs and running through snow. About a town that had saved him from his own pride. Because none of us make it alone, Marcus said. And Cedar Bluff knows that. Later, walking home through spring twilight, Sarah fell into step beside Marcus. Emma and Samuel ran ahead, their laughter carrying on the warming air. You did well today, Sarah said. With the Harrisons. I remembered what it felt like. Marcus replied, being on the receiving end. The confusion and gratitude all mixed together. You've come far from the man counting coins last October. Marcus considered this. I haven't come far. I just stopped walking the wrong direction. Sarah laughed, the sound warm and right. They walked in comfortable silence. 2 people who'd found each other through loss and learning and the patient work of healing. Marcus, Sarah's voice turned serious. May I ask you something? Anything. Do you think, she paused, choosing words carefully. Do you think you might be ready for more than friendship? I mean, Marcus stopped walking. Emma and Samuel had disappeared around a bend, their voices distant but happy. He looked at Sarah, this woman who'd saved him without permission, who'd taught him about grace and community and the courage to need people. I think, he said slowly, that Caroline was right. Grief makes you small unless you fight it. And I'm tired of being small. Is that a yes? Sarah's smile was tentative. It's a maybe becoming a yes. Marcus took her hand, rough carpenter's palm against her flour-dusted fingers. If you're patient with me. I've been patient this long, Sarah replied. I can wait a little longer. They walked on together, toward Marcus's homestead where Emma and Samuel were probably starting dinner without supervision, toward spring and planting and growing things, toward whatever came next, built on foundation of honesty and healed wounds, and the understanding that needing each other wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. At the cabin, Marcus saw his garden plot waiting for seeds. The roof stood firm. The wood Sarah had anonymously delivered was stacked neatly against the barn. And inside, his children were laughing, safe and warm and surrounded by community. Marcus thought of that October day, counting inadequate coins, putting items back on a counter while shame burned. He thought of the stranger who'd paid his bill, the town that had fixed his roof, the daughter who'd run through snow, the woman who'd taught him that accepting help was as brave as giving it. He thought of the Harrisons, starting over in Cedar Bluff, welcomed before they knew to ask, and tomorrow's strangers, and next month's, and all the people who would come to this town and find it was more than a place on a map. It was a home that chose its people as carefully as they chose it. What are you thinking? Sarah asked. Marcus squeezed her hand. That kindness is like wildfire on the prairie. Give it air, and it spreads farther than any one man could walk alone. That's beautiful, Sarah said. Did Caroline say that? No, Marcus replied, smiling. I just figured it out. They went inside together. To children and dinner and the simple comfort of not being alone. Outside, spring settled over Cedar Bluff with tender persistence. Gardens would be planted. Babies would be born. Strangers would arrive and become neighbors. And through it all, the chain would continue. Anonymous kindnesses spreading through the town like seeds on the wind, taking root in unexpected places, growing into something beautiful and sustaining and eternal. Marcus Brennan had counted his last coins in darkness, but he'd learned to plant in light. And that, he thought, made all the difference.